The purpose of this tutorial is to look at how histograms work and function within Activity Tracker. Activity Tracker is accessible from the Tracker menu exclusively from within PCDART. Okay, so I'm going to set up a general table and just look at all activities on all cows over the last year. I'm going to do it 12 months relative to test day. I'm going to grab all activities, and I'm going to leave this set on greater than or equal to 1. And I'm going to view the table by month. So now I'm going to preview, and I'll populate a table of all activities over the last year. So from this table, other tutorials go through how we can look at cow lists by clicking on a cell here and generating cow lists and exactly what the table means. This tutorial is going to look at histograms. So any cell within Activity Tracker, we can generate a histogram of the counts within that cell. A histogram is very simply a graphical count. We'll see here in a minute what that looks like. So these 43 dead cows over the last year, if I were to right-click on that cell, there a little window pops up that allows me to define how the histogram is going to count. I can do it relative to date, day of the year, week of the year, month of the year, last 12 months by week, last 12 months by month, or in various days and milk increments. Let's start out by looking at this by date. Okay, so again, my graph is labeled a died activity, and you can see the dates represented down here on the x-axis, September 27th through September 27th, essentially. So looking at the last year, and the counts here are 1. So this dairy, as you can see, has kind of had just one dead cow at a time, not any real pattern or spike of deads throughout the last year. You know, there were a couple days, 3 separate days, where they had 2 of them on one day. Everything else was just 1 on a particular day. Okay, this is not a large dairy, so we didn't have a lot of those. So that probably didn't help us much in learning more about this dairy. But now maybe you want to look at this and say, okay, let's look at it by month of the year. Maybe look at this a little easier to see if there's any monthly patterns for death loss. And it sure looks like over the last year there were fewer cows died in October than any other month. For whatever reason, June and October seem to be good months. Not surprisingly, August was very high. That's probably a hot month for that dairy. November and December were very high. That poses a question as to why. Now again, realize these counts, the differences are not much, and this is a very good lesson in looking at paying attention to the data you're looking at. The count here is 5. Okay, the count for these 3 months is 4. Only 1 cow difference, yet this bar looks vastly different, and it's really only 1 cow difference. So I need to be careful when looking at these, and this is probably not an appropriate way to compare these in this example. But we can graph any activity we want. Okay, now let's also look at these by days in milk, those 43 cows. So these cows all die in early lactation or in later lactation, and I'm going to break this up into 7-day increments of days in milk. So again, we're simply counting, so this first grouping here is 1 to 7 days in milk. So 9 of the cows that died were less than 7 days in milk when they died. Okay, so you can see a pattern that the majority of the deaths occurred in the first 3 weeks of lactation, and there were surprisingly quite a few who are out past 330 days. So we can do this with any activity and very simply graph when things happened. For example, let's look at all culls, those 244, and look at those by date. Okay, see they're pretty consistent throughout the year. And let's also look at those all culls. Whoops, excuse me. Let's look at those all culls. Right-click with my mouse in that cell. Let's look at those by month of the year. And now we got a fair number of animals within each box, so we can kind of look at when animals are leaving. It looks like August was a high month, March was a high month, and that may or may not mean something to that dairy. Okay, let's slide down and grab another activity. Let's look at mastitis. The recording event code 31 here. Let's look at those mastitis and see when cows are reportedly having mastitis. And this is days in milk increments again, okay? And it looks like it's pretty spread out throughout lactation, but there does seem to be a higher incidence here in early lactation. So again, these histograms are simply a graphical way to look at these counts, and sometimes a picture means more than a number, depending how you want to look at it, and it is a convenient way to look at the data. Now, when we go to heifer tables, the heifer tables are a little different, and where days in milk really is no longer valid or applicable. So let's look at the 28 died animals. And now, instead of days in milk, we're going to look at age when these events happen. So let's look at these deads by age and month. So you can see that most of these animals were less than 1 month of age when they died. 19 of that group of, I think it was 28. 19 of the 28 were were less than 1 month of age when they died, and then it had some sporadic ones outside of that. We could also do that by age in days, okay, to see when. This looks like a really tiny little graph, but you can see 4 of them were less than 2 days of age, and you can see the counts here relative, kind of sporadic throughout. That's kind of an ugly looking graph. There are cases where this graph would be more useful. That would probably be more useful to view this by age in weeks, and we can see that, yep, most of them died in the first week or the second week. That's when almost all the deaths occurred. Not surprising in this instance. So vaccinations, we may want to look at vaccinations, and what they're labeling here is vaccination 1. The veterinarian may be interested to look at this to say, gee, when did this vaccination occur? Okay, this was age 1. Calves were 1, 2, or 3 months of age when they got this vaccine. Is that when they should have got this vaccine? So a veterinarian would be interested in looking when vaccines potentially were given on a dairy. So the histograms, again, are just a convenient way to graphically look at activities that happen to cows. Right-click on any cell. I happen to grab the total cells, but you can look at any month, any time period, right-click on a cell, and generate a very quick histogram to get a picture of what things look at. And, of course, any of these can be printed easily for future use.